Welcome to the Global Energy Leaders Podcast, powered by R Squared Global.
Welcome to another edition of the Global Energy Leaders Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Ray, and today we're shifting gears and we're bringing on BB Denson to talk about her children's book that are pro-oil and gas. BB, how's it going today?
It's a great day here in Houston. Thank you for having me, Ryan.
Okay, so let's just kind of step back, and I want to talk about the books in a minute, but lead me up to the point that would make you want to write a book that is pro-oil and gas, which, that concept for some people just sounds crazy enough, but what made you want to write a book and a children's book in that manner?
Well, for my day job, I work for an environmental company, and my job with that company has been to listen to the problems of oil and gas with the idea that when I hear a problem in which my company can help them, then I reach into our company toolbox and go, aha, we can help you with this problem by doing this. And so I have spent the last almost 8 years now doing this. And a few years ago, it occurred to me that the number one problem, in my opinion, oil and gas has is that everybody hates us. And I couldn't reach into Weston's toolbox and come up with something that really addressed that problem. But I am an engineer by nature. I'm a problem solver, and it just bugged me. And I kept thinking about it and trying to figure out why everyone hates us so much. And I determined that it was because of everything they hear in the media and in the news, and that we weren't doing a very good job of putting another face out there in the media. And really, I can't fund a full-length feature film, and I couldn't start doing product placement in TV shows and movies, which are two things I really thought this is what we really ought to do. But I could, in this day and age where we've got self-publishing and digital everything, I thought I could write a book, and I could self-publish it and go ahead and try and make the case for oil and gas. And I chose the children's books because I spend a lot of my time listening to a lot of facts and figures and data from scientists and engineers. And based on all this data, we are not having catastrophic man-made climate change, and oil and gas is doing tremendous things for civilization. And I see so much information on a regular basis, and then I hear the opposite in the news, and I thought our problem is they aren't privy to this information. It's something you need to be an engineer or a scientist to really want to dig into the data and see all that I see all the time. So I thought what I wanted to try and do was simplify it to the point where a kid could understand it, with the idea that it's going to get through to some adults too when they see the book. And I have a section I call for the adults in the room, where I take, a 1,000-page study by someone, and I reduce it to a few sentences so you get the gist and why this is a good thing. And it's very simplified, but I thought it would be the easiest way to kind of get it out there to the general public. So that was a really long answer to a short question.
No, that's great. That's helpful because, you touched on a lot of stuff there, and I don't even know what kind of money it would actually take. You said you don't have the money to do a feature-length film. Well, okay, that's one thing, but to get product placement or stuff like that for Hollywood, they may not even take your money. So going self-publish might have been just the easiest way to kind of get the word out there. But the big thing I want to talk about is you mentioned the word catastrophic, and Alex Epstein talks about that a lot in his book, The Moral Case for Fossil Fuels, and that's one of the things that I really wasn't even aware of. For a long time, I didn't understand, what was going on. I knew that I wasn't, buying into the hype, but I didn't really understand how to categorize it. And then when he starts breaking down catastrophic climate change, just like you did, it's helpful to understand, okay, catastrophic climate change is not the same thing as climate change. And so that was a very helpful distinction there. And what kind of led you to that discovery? Was it, a self-study or reading books, or how did you come across that term catastrophic climate change that was helpful, at least for me, I'm sure for you, to understand those distinctions?
I think most of the scientists out there that study this all agree on that, actually. I think there's very few that don't and that actually do call it catastrophic climate change. It's kind of the opposite of what you would think if you listen to the media. What was it that Ronald Reagan said, that they know so much that just isn't true? And that's how I feel about this. I don't think there's anybody that denies our climate's changing. Our climate has been changing for hundreds of millions of years because the Earth just keeps changing. Nobody, has ever said otherwise. But is there anything catastrophic about it? No. Is it caused by man to a catastrophic extent? Certainly not. I mean, there's so many things that get exaggerated. For example, one of the reasons that my second book is about carbon, and why on earth someone would pick on carbon when you look at, and I think it makes up, the most anyone would say is like 4% of greenhouse gas is carbon. So why are we picking on carbon? Why is that the one that, carbon is, after all, what we're made of? We are a carbon-based life form. What are they going to do next? Go after water vapor? Because that's the other, 95% or something of the greenhouse gases, and they're going to start taxing us on water too. Is water a bad thing too? It's all just so ludicrous. It's hard to believe that people even say it with a straight face, in my opinion.
Yeah, and the frustrating thing I think is that on both sides of the aisle, no matter where you come from, is that if you say, well, I want to talk about climate change, well then you're cast as, from one side at least, as a climate denier, and that's not true. The problem is though is that there has been plenty of people on the other side who don't want to at least say, well, okay, yeah, there's climate change, but let's kind of make a more nuanced argument. And so we've kind of just gotten these two categories: either you're a climate change person or you're a climate denier. And really, I think what we're both saying is that, well, let's just have a discussion about what we mean when we say climate change, and is it catastrophic? What does this mean, and how do we think about that? And if the climate is changing, is that good? Is it bad? Just because the climate's changing doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. And so there's a lot of stuff there. But I want to get to the books now. So you wrote two books, and so kind of walk us through that process. Just as someone I've never produced a book in my life, so how did you come about sitting down, writing the book, and what was that like?
Well, it started Christmas before this last. I was out for a walk with my daughter and her boyfriend, and I was saying somebody should write a pro oil and gas children's book. That's what we need. We need something that's very simple, that just goes to the basic points in a simple way someone could understand. But how do you go about writing a children's book and make it about energy? And my daughter's boyfriend said, make it a go-kart that wants to grow up to be a car. And as soon as he said that, I saw the whole book in my head. He doesn't grow up to want to be a car, by the way. But as soon as he said go-kart, I all of a sudden I knew what I was going to do. And so I literally sat down the next day and I wrote the story. So in this book, it's a go-kart who realizes he needs power to go uphill. And so he looks at his choices out there and realizes that his conscience wouldn't let him do anything but go with oil and gas. So that was what got the first one going. And then the second one, Carbon Comes Out of the Closet. Well, I called it that because I realized that those of us that you were saying we're climate deniers. I have to say I heard recently the other side called science deniers, and I think that's an accurate description, because those of us that really pay attention to the science are going to not believe in man-made catastrophic climate change. But we are vilified for it, and I thought, I'm going to come out of the closet and say it, even if people are going to make fun of me for it. And then I had the idea about, the double entendre, have the carbon come out of the closet. So that's why that book is called Carbon Comes Out of the Closet, because he stores his carbon in his closet. And then again, because he feels his conscience won't let him do anything else, he releases his carbon into the atmosphere. So
Right, and one of the things I've read the books to my children, and thank you so much for sending me a copy of each. And I sat down last night before this interview. I said, okay, I've got to do it. They went out of town for a wedding, and so they just got back. And I said, okay, we got to read these books because I promised I'd read them before the show, and I don't want to read them by myself without reading them to them. So we sat down last night and reread them, and the one of the things I appreciate about the book is that you touch on a lot of deep things, but in a very light way. And so you talk about the news and propaganda and taxes and stuff like that. And so it gives the parent a good chance to say, okay, well, why is Gary concerned about the news, and how should we view the news? And so I thought you did a very good job of kind of touching on a bunch of different things that people every day they just kind of assume. Well, if it's the news, it must be true, or if we got to pay taxes, it must be a good thing. And so I thought you did a very good job that enables a parent to sit down and break down. Okay, just because the government says we have to pay taxes doesn't mean that's the right thing, or just because Fox News or NBC News or CNN. I'm trying to cover them all here, so everyone will get mad at me, I guess. But whatever news outlet you like, just because they say it doesn't mean it's true. And so I was very appreciative of that aspect of the book because it's important for us to kind of train our children up to be thinkers and to think about what they're being told and how to view that data. And so, how did you, when you said you kind of sat down and you wrote the book, and within a short period of time, was that one of the things that was in your forefront of your mind, going, okay, I need to make sure I lace all this together, or did it just work out naturally that way?
In both cases, once I had a vision for it, it just kind of spilled out. I wish I could tell you I had a real process for it, but once I got the idea in my head, I just couldn't stand it. I just had to write it all down and get it going. So it's a lot of fun. I had a blast doing this. So did your kids like it? Did they laugh?
Oh yeah, they liked it. Actually, what happened was I got the books in right before they went out of town, and I said, "Hey, we got to read these when you guys get back." And so my wife and my kids, they all went to the wedding and they came back, and I was looking. I found there was one sitting there where I left it, and the other one was gone. And I asked my son Drew. I said, "Drew, where's the other book?" He goes, "Oh, I read it. You said it was ours." And I said, "You read? Okay. Well, he's 9, so they could both read." And I said, "What'd you think?" He goes, "It was hilarious." And that was Carbon Comes Out of the Closet. He goes, "That was hilarious." And so then,
Oh, yay.
yeah, so he loved it. And then so that night, I sat down with both of them, and even my littlest, who's 15 months, so she didn't get any of it. But Drew and Ellicate are 9 and 7, and so they sat down and reread it. And they both liked it, and it was for Ellicate. The other thing here was important is that she's learning to read. She can read, not as well as Drew, but I'd hold the book up and she could follow along. So all the words were very, it's good spacing, good text, and those are things that you just don't think about all the time. But I was able to hold it up, and she was able to read along, in her mind as I was reading out loud. So it was a great experience, and we really loved it. And so did the kids. I loved it. The kids loved it, and I liked the resources at the back. I hadn't got a chance to go and look at all those, but I liked that there was a spot for adults that were maybe interested in continuing their education on this matter. So no, everyone loved it, and it was a good experience. It wasn't a long read. It wasn't like a 45-minute ordeal to read them both. It was the right amount of time.
Good. Thank you. Oh, you made my day. I'm so glad to hear that. So the notes in the back I added because when I first wrote the first book, I showed it to some friends and they didn't understand some of my points. They'd say, "Why would you say that?" For example, they'd say, why would birds be afraid of wind turbines? Why they go so slow?" And I thought, wow, people don't know that those things are going
Right.
almost 200 miles an hour. So I decided I needed to do that because if the adults are going to read these books to their kids, then they need to understand why I'm saying the things that I do. Uh, and I have to say, I'm glad. I'm really happy that you like the cadence or whatever in that book. I purposely did not go and see. I know I read a little bit about what are you supposed to do when you write a children's book, and
Right.
they say you're supposed to go and read all the new books that are out there to see how they're done. And I thought, I like Dr. Seuss when I read to my kids.
Right.
So, and you know how they kind of rhymed along
Hmm.
and such. So I just kept that in my mind as I did it. And I thought, I don't want to copy anybody else's. I just want it to be what I like. And so it
Well,
is.
it's
So,
funny you point that out, right? It's funny you point that out because when I was reading it, that's kind of what I thought of a Dr. Seuss book, and so I forgot to mention that. But no, that's exactly kind of what I thought. It had that Dr. Seuss feel, which is very easy and very good for kids because they can kind of they get the rhyme and gets good pattern and all that stuff. So no, it was great. So now that you put the book out there, though, I have to ask, how has the response been? Obviously the pro oil and gas people have probably been, patting you on the back and, hey, good job. But I'm sure there's been some folks that have had not so much favorable stuff to say about you as well.
Well, I have to say, I have not yet had my house egged, and I was afraid that might happen. So that's a good thing. The funniest thing is I've had some issues with Amazon. They pulled down my reviews, and then I have to go back and go, what happened to all my reviews? And then oh, my book's not available anymore. It's like, why is my book not available? And people send me notes and say, I ordered it from Amazon. They say it's not available. It's print on demand. It has to be available. So they've surprisingly have been the only ones that are just kind of funny about. I when I look on my website, I can see that people from Mountain View, California, are the main people that go and look at my website. So that's where Amazon's headquarters is. So I think some people there don't like it. So I'm going to say, if you're listening, go get the book at Barnes and Noble.
And we'll make sure to link to it at Barnes and Noble and Amazon as well.
Oh,
Maybe
that'd be good.
maybe the listeners will put a little pressure on Amazon to kind of balance that out. Well, you are a little bit of, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but an odd cat, because you're as you mentioned, you're an environmentalist who's pro oil and gas, and as someone who's worked in oil and gas, we're always like, oh God, we got to call the environmental people, and so it is refreshing to talk to someone, and I'm sure this has been a benefit for you on the professional side as well, because oil and gas companies are wanting to work with people who aren't going to come out there and just strap them with more regulations. So I'd imagine that you've had a lot of good feedback inside the industry too.
Oh, I have from the industry for the most part. I will say there are certain companies that just they have, like with Exxon, they're really looking into this, and I don't understand. I don't understand Shell and Exxon. Why don't they just stand up for their industry instead of saying, well, is a carbon tax a good idea? Maybe we should do it. And the cynic in me wonders if it depends on, and I think I've even heard this from some people. It depends on where their operations are, because it might be a benefit to them, a financial strategic benefit comparing to other companies, depending on who gets taxed where and whatever. So I don't know how all that stuff works, but for me, I just like to stick up for the truth. And I would say, I work with scientists, and most scientists do agree that catastrophic man-made climate change is not a thing. And so now there are some people that I work with that are on the other side. It's it's a mixed bag, but I would say I don't think I'm vilified by anyone within my company for it. So that's good.
Well,
That I know of.
right, right. Well, one of the things I've learned from traveling overseas is that when you get to, different countries in Africa or whatever, is a lot of the stuff that they're saying, they're hearing from our media. And so, or the World Bank may be pushing it. And so it's interesting when you talk about Exxon or some of these bigger companies and why they're saying what they're saying. This is a personal opinion here. It seems that the propaganda is so large that they have to kind of say that, or some of these countries will look at them going, "Oh man, you're way out of line. Do you understand what's
Right.
going on here?" And so it's so many political influences. So I just want to commend you. Thank you for putting this out, and especially in a format for our children, because in my house, educating my children is a top priority, and so this is just another avenue to do that. So thank you so much for being brave, and as I said, not in a bad way, kind of being the oddball who's willing to not only be the environmentalist but be the pro oil and gas environmentalist. And so I hope that pays major dividends to you in your career. And before I let you go, though, I think you have one more book coming out. So could you tell us about that?
Sure. Well, I haven't published that one yet because I'm looking for a publisher, because I have found that since my books are self-published, I can't get those into the distribution channels to get them into schools. And I know there are some schools that have told me, at least here in Texas, they would like to have my books. So I want to find a publisher that is willing to take on a controversial book like this. But I won't give you the whole plot, but the next book is going to be a different character. And in this book, the main character is going to see everything that is made in oil and gas disappear, because she's going to wish for it all to disappear. But I don't want to give you the whole story away, but that's going to be my third one. So if I can get a publisher, that's going to be the next one. I'm working on that now, so we will see.
Well, great. Well, look, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for the book, or the books rather. I think that they do a good service to our children, and as we all know, the children are the future. So, thank you so much, and continued success moving forward, not only professionally but in your book writing career. And hopefully, have you on again in the future.
Thank you. And I'm so glad your kids laughed when they read the book. That made my day. Thank you.
And thanks again to BB for coming on. Really enjoyed the discussion. And be sure to check out her books. We will link to those for Amazon and Barnes and Noble. And I think your kids will enjoy them. They're easy reads. And like I said in the interview, it's kind of got the Dr. Seuss feel to it. Would love to hear your feedback after you read the book and let me know what you think. You can always reach me using the website, globalenergymedia.com/contact. Thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, keep climbing.
Thanks for listening to the Global Energy Leaders Podcast, powered by R Squared Global.